Welcome everyone to this session, which is part of the Carter School's Peace Week. We host Peace Week every spring and every fall. This is the fall iteration of Peace Week. During Peace Week, we highlight interesting, relevant, exceptional things that Carter faculty, students, and alumni are engaged in. And it is really an effort to bring the Carter School community, both the current students and particularly the alum in our space. Most of the events, I believe, are virtual. I could stand corrected on that, which does make it easier. I was in an event Tuesday night where I was a panelist with several alum that had it was a session on careers. And we had about 30 mostly alum in the room talking about career trajectory and so forth. And it's really interesting. So it was, you get a chance to talk to people that you normally would not see. And particularly the mix between alum and students, I think is really valuable. So today we are going to focus on a particular experience that the students who represent the panel that I will have them introduce themselves engaged in June. And this centers around a course that I offered over the summer that will next be offered in the spring. And it's a course that was offered actually at the Carter School up until about 5 or 6 years ago. And so the course is conflict resolution in humanitarian crises. And it's a course that focuses on looking at the relationship between conflict, peace building, and humanitarianism. So I'm going to kind of move my slides along here and start off by having our panelists introduce themselves. And so Katrina, Elena, Joshua, and Kristine, if you just can all say just a few words about who you are, maybe what you're studying, maybe what you do, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'm gonna start with Katrina.
Hi everyone, my name is Katrina. I am currently getting a dual degree, so a master's in conflict analysis and resolution and a master's in social work. I took an undergrad in criminal justice and a psychology, and then I worked in the field of social work for about a year and then came back to school because I want to do international social work or humanitarian aid.
Thanks, Katrina. Elena.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Cirmizi, and I'm a PhD candidate at Carter School. So my education sort of focuses on legal aspects of conflict resolution, and I also focus on Eastern Europe as a region. So on intrastate ethnic conflicts in Eastern Europe. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty hot topic at this point. And during the past spring, I had some experience with humanitarian aid assistance. So I decided to take the course, and that's how I ended up on this panel.
Thanks, Elena. Josh.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Price. I am a master's student in the Carter School, Conflict Analysis and Resolution. It's actually my minor, my undergrad. But if anything, it's very exciting to be a part of a program where I can pursue initiatives that are surrounding peace building, perhaps humanitarianism. I'm very active in my faith, so that plays a huge role in how those things intertwine. So I'm pretty excited to see how things interact. And I can also see myself on that photo. Those are not boots. Those are just socks with pants in them. That's me. Didn't notice that.
And finally, Kristine Saunders, going by her, I'm not going to call it a nom de guerre. It's not your nom de guerre, right? It's your alias. Kitty the Wolf. Maybe my moniker. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Kristine Saunders. I'm taking a master's in conflict analysis and resolution. For my work, I'm currently a contractor for the government, and it looks like that I'll be putting some of the lessons learned from this particular class into effect during my deployment in a few months when I go over to Europe.
Right, great. Thanks, Kristine. And then finally, I'm David Smith. I'm an adjunct faculty member at the Carter School. I'm also a graduate of the Carter School, my master's degree from 2009. I teach this course on humanitarianism. I also teach a course on facilitation skills that Josh and Katrina are both in. So we spent last night together and we're spending this morning together. I also run the career seminar, and I'm also the president of the Forge Center for Peacebuilding Humanitarian Education. That was the host organization that that ran basically the simulation part of this class. So let's go ahead. So this is a photograph as I'm going through illustrated photographs. Yes, this is of Josh, but it's just not Josh. This is actually role players in the back. Josh comes in as a member of an NGO. He has to cross a border first to get into the country of Costero, and he is met by not so pleasant border security that will likely ask him to open his luggage and maybe turn the suitcase upside down and inspect everything, right? And then we have some people who have crossed the border on the other side. So you can understand this a little bit more as we get into it and students talk about their experience. So as I was saying, this centers around a class that was offered in the summer, it'll be offered next in the spring. It will be online and asynchronistic, except for the simulation. So in a sense, it's really a hybrid in a source. These are just the two books that are required in the class. There are a lot of other supplements. Yes, if you could, right. One of the books is Chasing Chaos by Jessica Alexander. It's about 10 years old, but it's a really interesting book of one American's experience in working for humanitarian organizations over the course of a period of time. And then the other book is a book on humanitarian experiences or humanitarian work by Daniel Maxwell and Kirsten Gisdorf on understanding the humanitarian world. So not to give you too much on that, but just for that you understand. The event itself, that is the simulation, is 4 days at our training site, which takes place in the summer course. It took place kind of in the middle of the class. In the spring, it'll take place towards the end. This is in Western Maryland and Garrett County. So if you are in the DMV area, if you take Maryland and go to the very end of Maryland, it's the last county of Maryland. If you're not in the DMV area, you can just kind of find it by doing a map quest. And this is the property that this is on. So we use a lot of the property for the students are kind of living in this area and they're meeting really all over the property. Just to talk a little bit about learning theory, which I think is at least is one of the things that's really important to me about all of this is that, so, you know, at the end of the day, we need to look at pedagogy, and how we learn is really critical to a successful graduate experience, I would say, or any kind of educational experience. And of course, there are different theories, different modalities of learning. And the modality that I have found most effective is experiential based. And that really comes from the notion that it's through experience that students actually transform their thinking, their behavior, and their action. Certainly, people learn in different ways, and some people and some faculty are more comfortable of a modality that maybe is more passive. But studies will show that the more engaged you bring the learner into the space, the more permanent and the more transformative the experience and the learning will be. So David Kolb's theory, which is actually pretty well known within the Carter School, a lot of faculty talk about it, the idea of having a concrete experience and a reflective observation, that kind of experience that's really kind of hardwired into an experiential simulation like this, where students are actually doing things, reflecting, considering, doing, reconceptualizing, and so forth. And then, of course, the father of all this is John Dewey. And, you know, two things, John Dewey really was, in his estimation, experience was essential, but it's not just the experience, it's the reflecting on the experience. If you have the experience, that's one thing, but if you look back and think about the experience, how it changed you. The quote that I think is really important, though, is we only think when confronted by the problem. This is not to say we don't think in other ways, but it's when we're confronted with a situation that really the most powerful thinking and the most powerful we'll say response comes from somebody. So I can sit in the classroom and tell you about, well, what if you did this and what if you did that, what would you do? And that's thinking, I suppose. But if I'm putting you in a situation and there you are face to face with the what if, right? It is standing in front of you. The thinking is a different type of thinking. And it's a thinking that is reflective on really of your behavior and the actions of what you do. I'm just going to show you a few photographs, and then I'm going to really turn it over to asking questions of the 4 students here. And then we should have time at the end to take questions from the audience. It seems like we got a small group, so it may be that I just will have people raise their hands and just do it through the microphone rather than the chat, but we'll just have to see. So these are just some photographs. These are all students from the Carter School, who both, there are 2 students here, Katrina and Elena are here, and Rick Fields, who was a student also. This is actually the last day of the event. We have a graduation, right? This is during the simulation itself. In the simulation, there are a couple things that happen. One of the things that's the core of the simulation is interacting with role players who play the role of NGO officials, government officials, internally displaced people, interviewing them, assessing what's going on, negotiating with them, negotiating among them. And often it's face-to-face, that is, we're bringing people into space, but we're also replicating kind of the reality that sometimes you're talking to the person via some sort of technology, right? They're actually not meeting with you. This role player actually in reality is in Toronto, who is, I don't know if anybody knew that, but she's really acting as a role player. I think she's an official of an NGO, but I might be mistaken. And these are the 2 students that are assigned to meet with her, right? This is looks a little bit of the camp. So this is really a field exercise in many respects, insofar as students are in the field. We have a church that we use that students can cook and bathe, not bathe, I must say, but at least brush their teeth and so forth, and bathroom in. And we have actually used the church, and we did use the church for people to sleep in because of one night it rained, but basically we're outside in tents. Part of the tents, the idea of the tents and individual tents was because of the pandemic, but also this reflects the reality of people working in the field. If you're an NGO worker, I mean, you're not going to be in a 5-star hotel. I mean, you might be in a hotel, but I don't want to present that type of experience for you. I want to present the experience for you that there is some, it's not so easy of a living experience for several days. You know, the kind of metaphoric understanding of living under mosquito netting is something that a lot of students who want to do this kind of work have never experienced. And if this is the experience of the work they want to do, having a sense of their ability, right, their perseverance, their ability to live in kind of harsh conditions, or at least harsh to what they have not experienced, become important. This is Elena and Josh, right? So what happens is people are working in teams, right? There's a lot of planning that's going on and trying to figure out what it is that you're going to do once you're assigned. So there are role players who are country staff who show up, meet you. They are enrolled, and they're kind of saying, okay, you're going to go meet these people over there, and this is what's going to happen. Or things happen that are unexpected, like security shows up and at 2 o'clock in the morning and decides everyone's got to get out of their tents because there's been a security breach. This gives you a sense of what happens in the field. These are interviews that are taking place then with internally displaced people. And this is the last day, has everybody there. We kind of take a group photograph that you see. This year we had 10 students, of which not all of them were Carter School students. 7 were Carter School students. 1 student was from the School of International Service at AU, and 2 students were from the University of Massachusetts, McCormick School, which has a Peace and Conflict master's degree program also. They came down for it. Okay. So I'm going to stop. Oh, I think I have one more slide. This is just a slide of the Forge Center and our website. This is actually a photograph many years ago from, we used to do our work in Florida before we moved up to Maryland. And this is students that came that year. Actually, these all students are from, this person is from American University. So we've been operating this simulation for going on, well, if you took the long span of our work for over 20 years, but as a Ford Center for 6 years at this point. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing and stop the slideshow. And what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of talk a little bit, right? And so what I wanted to do was really turn this to Katrina, Josh, Elena, and Kristine, and really pose questions on them. You know, when we were planning this, you know, I think like any instructor, I have my objectives, but really, I think I'm really more curious. And I think it's more beneficial to kind of get a sense of what they got out of this. So I even asked them to think about what questions. So my first question, and I'm going to ask each of them, I'll start with Katrina, go to Josh, Elena, and Kristine, is that what lessons and experiences were significant to you? And it could be a particular event or maybe a span of events, and why that is relevant for your career, right? In something like this. So I'm going to start with Katrina.
So for me, I think probably the most significant was trying to work with government officials, learning how to negotiate with them and how to kindly deny requests that were unethical, things like that. That was probably the most significant, was learning how to talk to government officials, including police, as well as other NGO workers.
Okay, thank you. Josh, tell us about what experiences were meaningful for you.
Yeah, so I think for me, you know, I think there is kind of the corporate experience as well as the personal experience that really stood out to me. I think from a more generic standpoint, just kind of understanding the architecture of humanitarian aid and also how, you know, it's different amongst different conflicts, especially with the country that we were in, Costero. There was so many different things that were happening at the same period of time. And there was always something that we were aware of and always something that we weren't aware of. So I think it was kind of a learning experience every single minute. So I thought that was pretty important. I think that the significance, like Katrina mentioned, of just building relationships with these various stakeholders is very important, because that's how you learn too. But that's also just kind of a means of building trust. And so that's something that stood out to me. From a personal standpoint, an experience like this draws a lot out of you. It's a sacrifice. As you mentioned, David, I think for me, I was actually sick going into this. I did not have COVID, but I will say that in a congruence with some of the things that we did go through, you just kind of have to push forward, because imagining yourself in a different conflict, it is something that, you know, you have to kind of be mindful of, is that you're on a journey, you're on a mission. And so being reminded of that is pretty critical.
Yeah, you're talking about experiences and being uncomfortable. I think merely the experience of having to put up a tent, I think for some students is not something that they've done, right? And I know that seems like, well, that's kind of minor, but the idea that we would work as a team to help each other when we were putting up tents, people knew how to put up tents and some people didn't know how to put up tents, who were helping each other doing it. That's all part of the experiential learning of working as a team to do those kind of things. And then food duty and those kind of things. So
exactly.
Elena, what are you thinking?
So I think for me, there were also two parts, and one part was the educational part, where it was very interesting how the theories that we sort of learned throughout the years and that we discussed before going into the experience, how sometimes hard it's to apply them, you know, when you're right in the moment. The negotiation skills, and you sort of always go into the conversation with the government officials or with anybody else, you know, trying to think through the strategy. But then the whole thing falls apart sometimes because your plan doesn't work out. So in a way, it was an interesting experience to be out of the comfort zone in that case, in that way. Then also, I think for me, it was very valuable to see how it's hard to be always on, always, you know, paying attention, making sure that you follow the instructions and all of that. You know, yes, it's still sort of a simulation. It's not reality, and your life is not really in danger, and all of that. But at the same time, there is always a need to pay attention, to be on, to make sure that you that you are on the top of your game. And that's not going to happen. Like, you're not going to be always on the top of the game. So, and as I think Josh mentioned several times during our experience, that and that's okay. Like, if you are not on the top of the game, that's fine too. But that's learning how to accept and how to accept the failures and to move on and to be on with the rest of the things. That was pretty powerful for me.
You know, being at the top of your game, being present is really important. And one of the things that may surprise those in the audience, and I think maybe surprise you are, but I don't think it took away from your experience, is that you don't bring your cell phones into this. There is no outside, you are the word incommunicado in the real sense of the word. We do use cell phones, but they're not yours because we're holding meetings. But you can't check your email, you can't talk home, you're in Costero, right? And that's kind of maybe hard for a little while, but then what happens is, I'm going to let Noelle in because I know her. I think what happens is that once you're then in that experience, you then start to kind of depend on each other, and you're forming that community because there's no kind of outside there that kind of changes that. So thanks, Elena. And Kristine, tell us your thoughts.
There are multiple layers of this experience. And I think that the juggling act that you have to do while you're in quote unquote another country with no contact to back home, none of your usual comforts, and pretty much all that you are able to cover yourself with for comfort is just your mind space. You're marshaling your own mind space so that you can handle complex questions and complex problems. So you're minding yourself, you're minding your teammates, you're minding the conflict, because it's forever moving and evolving, and you're minding the people that are affected by the conflict. So that's everything from the government officials to the NGOs to the displaced persons that you may come across. So on multiple levels, just like Elena said, you have to be on your game, and sometimes you're not, and you're watching other people sort of step off the platform and not be on their game a little bit, so you have to be there for them. And then there are unexpected ways that the conflict or that the people that you meet will affect you. And it'll be at a very deep level that you don't touch base with that level when you're in your comfort zone or in your regular space. So this is a immediately a valuable experience for you, because coming to an idea of yourself that's not what you used to have about yourself, and coming to an idea about how this industry works, people in this industry, it's very impactful. Lots to chew on the way home.
Yeah, that on the way home trip, because a lot of you drove together, I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in that, because first of all, you're exhausted, going home. That's the one thing I always remember. Make sure not one person is doing all the driving, So let me go to the next question. And then, like I said, we can bounce back and forth. And I don't mean this to be like, I'm going to ask you questions. We can do some cross conversation too. And then, like I said, we'll open it up. The second question really has to do with diversity. That is, the diversity of those brought into this experience, all having different backgrounds, be they diversity from standpoint of ethnicity or life experience or whatever. what did that mean to this experience? And what did that mean to you? I'm going to start again with Katrina and work across.
I think for me, one of the most impactful parts of the diversity was that, as one of the youngest people there, I really got to learn and watch everyone as they incorporate their own life experience and their own professional experience. And everyone came from different backgrounds in personal and professional lives. So the insights that they had into the situation and into how we should deal with it and the processes that we needed to go through as a group were really impactful for me in my learning of how to work with a diverse group, and of how to work in that kind of a situation.
Okay, thank you. Josh.
Yeah, just kind of a similar point there. It was really impactful to work with a diversity of people who, you're working with students who, who have done a lot of research as it pertains to peace building. I know Elena has done a lot of work when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, and especially when it comes to Katrina and her work and, social work. I peeled a lot there. And, as far as my faith is concerned. So there's a lot of different experiences. And I think that really makes the planning, the strategy, and also just kind of the bonding experience that much more meaningful because we have different experiences to where we can draw. And so coming into an experience like this in humanitarianism and participating in a simulation like this, you get to learn from different people. And I think that the importance of this question really strives on being humble enough to be able to learn from these different experiences. And so I think that's what made that more meaningful. And I think that's how I was able to gain so many skills and so many experiences in such a short amount of time. So it's kind of like a crash course in many ways, but you kind of tackle that diversity of experience on it, and it makes it so good.
Thanks, Josh. Elena.
So yeah, I will probably second what Katrina and Josh said. It's the richness of experience that you get when you have a very different group of people. It's one of the experiences, I think, when when you have people who are sort of used to work the same way, they are doing the same thing, and they're in tune with each other. But then when you get a group of people that is has very different, comes from very different backgrounds, has different experiences, it's a completely different ballgame. And also, it's the reactions to the stress that you get that are very different, and you never know how a person would react to the conditions on the ground. So observing that and learning about the people, how they react, and learning about yourself, how you react and how your reactions are different from others, that I think that was something that diversity truly brought to me. Yeah.
Thank you. And Kristine.
You get the blessing of being surrounded by a lot of very smart, very articulate, and very empathic people when you go on a trip like this. And not just in the trip, but I suspect that if this is your profession, then you are surrounded by people who are, while they're like-minded, they are differently filtered. They have different backgrounds, they have different priorities, they have different living experiences to bring, and different stresses or concerns to bring along. So you've got all of that to draw from. That's normally what we're doing in our regular life is we're looking for like-minded people. We're looking for the birds of a feather crowd, but you really are thrown together with people who individually help you reach a new place in terms of how you're seeing the world around you. And I think there's this contagious feeling of if they're looking out for you, you want to look out for them.
Yeah.
And that transfers to what you're doing in the field. You start wanting to look out for the people in the field because everything is volatile. The way that you present yourself, the way the wording comes across, the way that word about you travels and what your reputation collectively gets represented as to the people that you're trying to help. So it's easy to forget that any one of you could be affecting other people in the group, or any one of you could be affecting the situation that you're all trying to respond to.
Right.
So that diversity really does help in collectively figuring out how are you going to do that together.
Affecting the mission. I mean, one of the things you're saying is it affects each other, but you are part of a greater organization in the simulation. The Forge Corps is part of a larger effort, right? And the whole organization, one member could undermine a mission, right? And then has to explain what happened and so forth. There is that sense of that. Yeah, thank you. All right, so the next question has to do, this question deals with fitting into a master's student education plans of peace building, but I think the core of the question more relates to peace building, humanitarianism, what's the connection? Which is kind of the why question, like, why should a student in peace building take a course like this? Why should this be an experience that they would want to engage in, right? Which I think is important if you're coming to this and you're thinking, well, do I have to go into humanitarian work? No, not necessarily. But why would a student in our cohort master's degree would want to do this, or PhD students? Katrina, what are you thinking?
So I mean, on a personal level, like I wanted to go into humanitarian aid. So I think that it's a really important course to offer for anyone that might be going in that direction or might be considering that. But I think that also as a wider class, it's really important to take because it gives you a deeper understanding of the issues going along like in the world. It also gives you a deeper understanding of like current events and how different systems interact with one another. Certainly in this course, at this time, right, we have the war in Ukraine, which is all over the news. And before this course, I don't think I really understood quite how each part impacts each other and how something going on so far away can impact us here and has all the ripple effects, and how, you know, one agency doing something maybe unethical or that's viewed as unethical can impact their ability to do their job and their ability to do their job in other situations around the world. You know, like the Red Cross, they have people all around the world. So
Right.
jeopardizing a relationship in one area can jeopardize their relationship other places. So I think that no matter what you're looking at going into within the peace building realm, it's really important to broaden your understanding of these types of issues.
I mean, what was interesting, remember on the last day, I had a colleague of mine who was the director of Ukrainian response for the International Justice Mission, who is in Romania right now. And the International Justice Mission, I think, focuses on trafficking, among other things. And so we brought him in, and you're all like, aha, right? He's talking about the problems he has in Romania and coordinating. You're saying, well, we just did that for 3 days, right? So having that kind of bringing somebody in the moment in Ukraine who is saying, what your experience is what I'm experiencing every day becomes really valuable too, right? So thank you, Katrina. Josh.
Yeah, so I think that for me, I have never been out of the country before. So having a lot of exposure to international conflicts across the world is something that I'm very intentional about, because I always say that even though I haven't been international or to any context as such, I'm going to many. That's kind of my, mindset there. But the main thing is I remember doing some research into human trafficking as it pertains to, children, families back in my undergrad, and having an understanding and also contributing to organizations such as IJM, Samaritan's Purse, the Mercy Corps, some of these entities that work in some of these conflicts that you do hear about across the world was something that really inspired me. So thinking about a class like this as it pertains to peace building gave me an opportunity to kind of get a more granular understanding of what the field is like, but at the same time, experience it for myself in terms of how I would interact and how I would perhaps learn in different conflict zones across the world. So I think this is a good course for so many people as far as, you know, the experiences that you have. If you have little experience, it's still fun because you'll find something within the experience that will be foundational towards whatever peace building or whatever opportunity that you're thinking about pursuing. So I think that this really touched on a lot of points for me. And it made me really excited about some of the options that I may consider as I go forward with, you know, my career and also the relationships that I built. So
Thanks, Josh.
Mhm.
Elena.
Yeah, so I have a pretty strategic answer to that. While studying in Carter School, I think we don't have enough practical courses.
Mm.
So I believe that there is a need for more exposure to on-the-ground work that people are doing. So to me, this was one of the options to do that, something that is different from regular reading book experience.
Mhm.
And then also, I think when we study in conflict analysis and resolution field, we never really know where the career path will take us. So at the end of the day, you know, there is, when you ask I know that when I ask my undergrads, okay, so what do you want to do with your life after you graduate? It's always the answer that is pretty vague or that is very directed, like I want to work in foreign services for US government, or I want to be a diplomat, or I want to be a humanitarian. And there is a very, you know, narrow approach. So the point is that it's either too wide or too narrow. And but life doesn't play out according to our plans sometimes. And sometimes you don't pass the foreign service exam, or you don't get just don't get an opportunity to work for the US government, or at the same time you might get job in UN or Red Cross. Suddenly somebody refers you to that opportunity, and you take it. So understanding, I think, what the humanitarian work entails, and at least knowing what you don't know in terms of what skills you need to have in order to pursue that career. And if you have the opportunity to pursue it, what else you need to get in order to be successful in that career. I think it's very important.
Thank you.
So to me, that's one of the reasons why I believe that this should be one of the required courses. But
and also you're a PhD student, and you've taught, right? So you see it from the faculty standpoint also how valuable this is, you know. And I think
yes. And there is always you know, this hunger among the students. There is a hunger for case studies, for hands-on experiences, for having some sort of round tables and negotiations. And this is one of the opportunities, I think, that students, probably not only Carter School students, but students from Shar School, from public policy, that for them, it's also should be a valuable experience. I have last time when I taught the global conflict, and I had a lot of students from global studies. I think that was something. And that among them, I know that that was one of the main complaints about the degree itself, that, okay, you study, you know the theory, you know all of the ins and outs in these theories, but you don't know the real work. And that is often also the response that we get from hiring agencies or from employers, that students end up with a lot of knowledge, book knowledge, but they do not have the experience that they need in order to start the career. And this is one of the opportunities, I think.
Thank you. Kristine.
So there are a couple of things to say about my filter as I was going into this. I was never under the impression that I was cut out for humanitarian aid or humanitarian assistance, but I'm still interested in it. And I'm still interested in peace building. So going into it, there was already a perception that I had about the subject and about the industry. But coming out of it, there were two things that happened. One was I was ever more confirmed about my not being cut out for being a field worker, but I am much more interested in how do I make the field worker's life more productive, optimized for them. I understand the problems on the ground now. I understand the experience that they're going through. And if I were to read something in the news or hear something through my work about an operation that failed, I will understand when they detail why and be like, yeah, that's a very real thing. Or, you know, I have many ideas about how to fix that. And I think what the industry gets full with is a lot of well-meaning, big-hearted, motivated people who don't know all the pieces that make up the whole. And going into this, you start finding out that there are steps and processes, and there's a culture, and there's a language that is ingrained in this industry. Learning that language and learning that mind space that the professionals have allows you to be able to speak with them, but also translate for people who don't belong to this industry what it's like, what they need, what kind of gaps are there that can be filled, or what did we get wrong before that we don't want to get wrong now.
Yeah.
So there's the ability to be able to speak both languages, where the crossover in language between peace building and humanitarianism comes in. I think we're continually in a learning curve where there's a lot of mistakes to learn from, but we need more people who have this exposure on either on the ground as in a class, as opposed to on the ground in the real world, to be able to understand these things so that we can fix them before we get out into the field.
Yeah. You know, good observations, all of you. I'm struck by one thing that you said, Kristine, that I don't want to lose this, is that you can go through an experience of this and realize, I'm not cut out for this. That's okay. In fact, that's good. I do not want anybody to be deployed somewhere in the world and to realize that they're in the middle of somewhere and it's just not for them. That's what an experience like this can provide you. It can give you a little bit of the taste for you to recognize that this is great, but this is not my cup of tea. And there are other things that I can be doing and supporting. I've had over the years, as many students who have said that, for as many students who've gone on to the Peace Corps, or gotten a Fulbright grant, or gone to work for an NGO after an experience like this. So it's important that you learn about yourself in that process, which is what Kristine is suggesting. So the last question, I'll ask you one last question, and then I want to get everyone in the room who have questions. And I know we even have some Forge Center folks here that I want to introduce if I can. So the last question is really, how did the course raise your awareness of broader humanitarian issues? Issues relate to maybe logistics, process, principles. How did the course and certainly the simulation do that? Katrina.
I think for me, like touching back on what you just said about trying to decide if this is what's right for me, I think that was one of the biggest overall takeaways that I got, and like learning what it's like, what are the mental health pieces that you need to think about, especially, you know, being in the mental health field myself. And thinking about whether I go into field work or if I go into it on the other side and, working within humanitarian aid, broader areas, thinking about some of the things, some of the cultural things within aid work that are good and some of the things that maybe need to change a little bit, and how I can bring that social work side in and influence maybe some of that and help raise awareness for some of those issues was a really big thing. I think the other really big part of that for me, of the logistics, was just learning how difficult it is, how much narrative, I guess, really plays a role, and how difficult it is to keep a track of all the different narratives and what's really happening, and make sure you're communicating with one another, because we weren't always meeting with the same people. Sometimes we would switch and somebody else just met with them, and then we had 10 minutes to debrief and learn everything they talked about. And so thinking through what are the most important things to know, and how narratives are being changed and manipulated on the ground, I think was really, really beneficial.
Yeah, you point out the handoff was often the most precarious thing, right? Because you had one team who would meet with somebody, then the next team was going to be doing it, and did they communicate to the next team what's going on, right? Kind of a thing, right? And so that you could move forward rather than all of a sudden we're kind of lost in the communication space kind of thing. So, Josh.
Yeah, so I think that I viewed humanitarianism from because of, how active I am in my faith, I kind of, view it a great deal in that light, because a lot of, like I mentioned, what I'm exposed to is some of these organizations that have done a lot of work in terms of disaster response in various conflict zones. So participating in an experience like this really gave me, an understanding of just kind of the logistics. Like I mentioned, the architecture in terms of how, architecting different understandings of processes. So I think for me, one of the things that really stood out for me in terms of just the different issues that arose and how that kind of broadened my understanding was just learning about the ethics and the laws surrounding humanitarianism, learning about impartiality and how that impacts the types of relationships that you build and how to build those relationships, understanding how that impacts instances of discrimination or sexual harassment that may occur when it comes to addressing certain populations or even internal to humanitarianism, or even how the increase of technology has become more useful in the field too. So learning about some of these different instances really draws a lot out of you. I think that where humanitarianism is today, it's a much a popular field at this point because of how crazy the world is going when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, and also different disasters that have occurred throughout the United States that we've heard. So it's interesting to see how popular this field has gone. I do think that as you go through it, you learn about how it's always a place for ethics in every circumstance, and you learn a lesson about, okay, maybe I shouldn't give that order, or maybe I should give that order on the basis of a supply that you have while you're deployed. So it's interesting to see how you can pick up on certain instances that affect conversations about ethics, and also how international humanitarian law really impacts, your operation. So I think that really brings a big point, but I think that relying on your team members is really, really crucial, because not only does it build trust, but that humility to kind of peel off, like we said, the different experiences that people bring that's going to kind of make you work together as a team. And that's critical. As a matter of fact, sometimes that overshadows the knowledge that you can learn, because not everybody's going to know everything. And as you are exposed to different conflicts, you're learning about these conflicts as you go. And sometimes there's no system sufficient enough to accommodate that conflict, especially when we learn about Haiti and how that happened. So it's interesting to kind of learn about just the different ethics, the laws, the modalities that surround the field. And it's a continuous learning process.
You mentioned humility a couple of times, and I think that's, I mean, we all are challenged with trying to find our humility in a situation, right? We do come to situations saying, but I know certain things, and so what I know is valuable, and starting to recognize that, oh, maybe I don't, and if I take a more humble approach to things, then I can be open to more learning. The other thing that you suggested, which I don't want to forget, is that, so you're saying humanitarianism is popular. Yes, it's needed, and it's because the world is changing, and we're moving from humanitarian response to war and conflict, which is not going away, to humanitarian response to climate change, right? So Pakistan, right? Puerto Rico, right? Eastern Kentucky, right? This is all flood-based, right? And so we don't want to separate humanitarianism from disaster relief. Sometimes we call it that, and sometimes we go, but it all takes the same effort and the same thinking about the work and doing the work. And I think we're going to increasingly see, as the seas rise and the forest burns and all of this going on, this is going to be, unfortunately, a growth industry, because we're going to need more and more ways of responding to it. Okay, Elena, what are your thoughts?
So I think, yeah, to just add to all of what has been said, one of the important things was the application of principles to the reality of the situation in Costero, and how the principles, the difference between how humanitarian workers view principles of humanitarian work and how it's taken by the locals.
Mm-hmm.
So this disconnect that exists there is very important. And for humanitarian workers, I think it's important to understand how that the principles and how when they are performing those principles, how that translates into the view of locals. How impartiality could be viewed as partiality by certain groups, and the narrative built around that, what happens with that. So to us, and to laymen in general, humanitarian work seems like an easy thing to do. Like, okay, you go and you create the program, or you bring money, you give out the money. But that's not how it is on the ground. There are a lot of ethical issues to navigate, a lot of narrative issues to navigate. And in order not to cause more harm, there is a huge need for understanding of principles by the locals and by the humanitarian workers.
Yeah, of course.
Like a game between two different groups that happens.
Thank you. Kristine.
I'm starting to notice a lot more events that are domestic going on here in the States that can be labeled as a humanitarian crisis. And I think you're right that we can't fully separate disaster relief from humanitarian crisis, but something that we can do is get the practice in for how to reduce human suffering, which is the point of whenever we're going overseas to be able to do it. What we have to be sensitive to is that the terrain is different wherever the other place is that's outside of the US. The personalities and the conflicts are different. Political conflicts or ambiguities, or people trying to take advantage of your help, or maybe people within your group trying to take advantage of the people. I'm not saying that happened at all during Costero. I'm saying that in other situations, real life situations, that's been the case before. Being sensitive to how different every humanitarian situation is key to being able to come up with a plan, because you're not there to get front seats to admire the problem. You're there to help assist in bringing it to a close. And there's a timeline to be able to do it in. And there are people who are depending on you to get it right. And recovering from your mistakes is something that you also have to get right. So I'm looking at the ones that are more accessible here in the US and dissecting from afar how would that logistically what's needed for those things, and what kind of problem solving is being done on the ground there. Because now there is a template that feels like a very real experience that I can talk with my former deployment mates and other professionals to be able to say, this is how I would do it. This is the problem that they're up against. And you know, it's really different admiring it from, you know, a safe distance when you come up to a problem that you yourself have to fix, knowing what the steps are that other people have taken and trying to dissect how they've arrived at those decisions is so important.
Thank you. So, so what I'm going to do is we've got another 20 minutes. I want to open to questions, but I first want to introduce Cindy Epperson and Priscilla Briones, who are both works with the Four Genders. Cindy is on the board. Cindy, do you want to say hi? Open your mic and say hi if you're still there. Maybe you stepped away. Priscilla, do you want to say hi? Hey, Priscilla.
Hi.
Are those Katrina, Josh, you remember?
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, Priscilla was our reporter, right? Our little bit of a spy, maybe at times.
Spying, yes.
Was there, you know. And Cindy, hey, Cindy.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to get to the unmute button. I mean, I knew how to do it, but I couldn't do
Cindy
it.
as being a trainer. Hey, Cindy.
But hi, everyone. It's so good to see some of your faces.
It's great. That's great. So, so let's take some questions. It's, you know, we're a small group, and I am just going to, ask people just to open their mics. That's the easiest thing to do. And what'll happen is when you open your mic, you then kind of work your way to the top of my list. So we have Benjamin and Jessica and Jillian and Juliana and Melinda and Melvin. Do any of you have questions? Just open your mic, ask the question. Now, if you really want to put it in the chat, then I'll read it. But if you want to kind of ask it, it could be any one of us or just one of us. Questions, thoughts, observations, curiosities, anything anybody wants. I'm trying to think about how you're supposed to.
I can go. I have one.
Yeah, Juliana. Yes, nice to meet you, Juliana. Where are you? I always interested in where people are physically. Where are you physically today?
I'm physically on the Fairfax campus.
Okay, great. Do you have a question or a thought, or go ahead?
Kind of a question. So I am an accelerated master's student, so I'm still completing my undergrad, and they're both in conflict. And I was just wondering, I still don't really know what I want to do with it. So I was wondering if you guys would recommend taking a course like this when you're still completing your undergrad and your master's at the same time to try to figure it out.
I'm going to let the students tell me.
100% yes.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to make mistakes in a safe environment and come up with plans that you sort of get to see in execution, work with people who are both very green professionally or very experienced professionally. And the kind of advice that you get from the professors in the field or in the simulation, you get to apply it either right then and there, or you get to think on it and think about how to apply it later on in your career.
Thanks, Kristine.
Yeah, and I think to add on that for me, I actually, you know, sometimes I'm like, I'm still figuring it out too. But I think taking a course like this actually added a lot of precision to my direction in terms of peace building. And so just kind of having that experiential learning foundation really allows you to sense where you kind of land. And especially if that's something that you're looking to do, or if it's not something that you're looking to do, at least it's an experiential learning opportunity that can attest to something that you would go into. So I think for me, I felt that there was a lot of clearness in terms of, my journey after going through this simulation. So I think that it's going to be beneficial for you in whatever direction that you decide to take, depending on, the types of exposures that you do have. So pretty exciting.
Katrina.
And I want to add on to that. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. And I think that it's important to remember that this course really teaches you what you're going to need to know, because it's so different than any other conflict class that you're going to take. So you really don't need to have taken any specific courses. I went into this course having only taken Conflict 600 because I'm in the dual degree. And I don't think it was a challenge at all to keep up or to catch up with anything. You're really going to learn a lot from this experience, like everyone said. And I think that it's also really been helpful to move on to my other courses, having this already in the background.
Thank you. Other questions? Just open your mic. Curiosities or questions? We had a conversation, our facilitation class last night, which Katrina and Josh is, how do you generate interest, right? When people don't want to speak in facilitation. I guess I could call on people, right? I don't know if I want to do that necessarily here. Trying to think about, how to get people to participate. Anyone else? Oh yeah, is it Miron? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's Miron.
Yeah, Miron, go ahead. What do you want to offer us? Ask us.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I mean, it's kind of a basic question, but what's something that, what's a misconception you had before you walked out, onto the field and everything, and what do you feel like you wish you knew, before you did the humanitarian work that you knew? I know you guys spoke a lot to mental health and even kind of just self-care practices, which I thought was really cool, but in terms of even professionally, if there are things, but or not, just in any context.
And Miron, where are you? I'm just curious where you are physically.
I'm also on the Fairfax campus.
Okay, great. Okay. Anybody want to take that?
I can take that.
Yeah, good.
Well, at least
Good.
partially. So I found that it's very helpful to have taken somatic skills course before this course. So I've done somatic skills probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's just 2 weekends class, I think it was. So point of that class was the ability to recognize
Elena, you muted yourself.
Oh, okay. So sorry. So I think the point of the somatic skills course that I was taking, that I have taken before this humanitarian course, was that it taught me to recognize the stress and physically recognize the stress that I'm in and how to digest it. So that is a very helpful skill to have before going into this class, into this experience. Because as I said before, you will be required to stay on basically mentally 24/7. And to work through that, you will need, at least I think that you will, it would be very helpful to have an opportunity to work on yourself and to work on digesting the stress. So that's my.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. Let me go to another question. Melvin, what would you like to ask? Or
just real quick, I want to make the intersection between diversity and inclusion work, I call it belonging work,
yeah,
and this matter of humanitarian work.
mm-hmm.
If we think about this nature, the notion of humility requires in both instances that you center on the other to help them reach their better and higher good, because the work is only about human flourishing and human betterment. And that would be the charge of any of this work that any of us are called to do, I am really enjoying the benefit of listening to you as students because it helps me in my own work outside of being a student, but more of a teacher. So, thank you for this. I'm enjoying the benefit of listening to all of you guys.
Thank you, Melvin. Thank you for joining us. Melinda.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Sure. Where are you calling from?
Good. I'm joining you from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Oh, wow. Okay. You get the award for the farthest person.
Originally from Virginia. I'm a graduate of EMU, so my heart is with you all. I work for a Mennonite Central Committee based here in Johannesburg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so 2 questions. Start with the easier one because I'm not familiar with your program. Is there opportunity either in undergrad or the graduate level to do like a study abroad where you might be exposed to these type of like field work? And 2, maybe it wasn't so much explicitly said, but I'm looking for any example of conflict resolution and conflict management that you had to do while conducting this humanitarian work.
So yeah, let me answer the first question, and maybe even Elena might have an answer because she's taught in the Carter School also. So you're in Johannesburg and you're not a Carter School student, right? So you're thinking about, so the Carter School, at least the master's degree, much of it is, we have a very strong online cohort. They're taking it by distance. This class is asynchronistic, but the field experience is face-to-face. So students have to come for that. If you're asking about if you were a student, a face-to-face student in Arlington, would you go study abroad? We do have some study abroad experiences. For instance, we have a master's program that's a dual master's degree in Malta. So I don't know if that's getting to it. Elena, is there anything else you know of?
So there is a Malta program that is definitely, it could be a semester program or it could be the full year program in Malta where there is an exposure to humanitarian work. The students there have a chance to work with refugees. Then there is an experience in, this is like two weeks, I think, experience in Jordan with refugee camps and with refugees from Syria. So there is definitely an opportunity to, and it's more of an interviewing and implementing the certain programs that faculty member has set up already. I know that we used to have the Indonesia program. I don't know if it's still on because of the COVID and all of the stuff that has been happening. Yeah. So we had during COVID time, obviously, all of this has been put into hold. So I don't know what came back after that, but Indonesia program was a summer program for a month. And students definitely had an opportunity to engage with the communities. So it was more of a humanitarian work within the country of origin. So like not with refugees, but within ethnic groups within Indonesia. Ethnic and other minority groups within Indonesia. So yeah, there is an opportunity to sort of to draw lines between this experience, particular experience in Costero with the other programs, other study abroad programs. If you have been asking about that. And I forgot what was the second question.
Well, let me say one thing, Melinda. You said I put my email in the chat. If you email me, I'll direct you to the right people at the Carter School, right? Yeah, Melinda, if you could restate your second question again, that was great. That may be the question we finish on, because we've got to finish in about 5 minutes. So what was your second question again? I'm sorry.
Okay. Just for the panelists to say, give an example of a conflict resolution out in the field.
So conflicts you resolved in the simulation.
Yeah.
Katrina, Elena, Josh, Kristine.
So as part of the political context that we were given before the simulation, there are some ethnic tensions going on between the northern people and the southern people. You get an extensive dossier about the history that led to those ethnic tensions. So you get a sense of what the people see themselves as, but that is not useless information at all, because when you start talking to the representatives of different parts of the government, you start seeing those tensions flare up when you talk about needing these people to work together in a time of crisis. So trying to be the punching bag and the conflict resolver is definitely a whole team effort. When you're trying to relay to your other team members, be careful of this one because she's a northerner, and if you mention the southerners, it's going to be like this. So communicating with your team members what you just ran into and what kind of conversation you're about to have or they're about to have for that person is so key.
And also,
yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, and also one thing that I will say about, and this is kind of something and that's an important question, because one thing that I learned through this experience was kind of the difference between kind of assessing the need and also responding with immediate action, especially as, in Costero, there were these wildfires, and these wildfires were spreading fast. And so, yes, we can build these relationships. We can learn about some of the different instances and conflicts that are occurring, but at some point we have to respond. And so you have to kind of know that you're not going to be perfect, and every single action that you take, not everything's going to be adequate, but sometimes you have to kind of weigh, the needs that you do need to assess and also how to respond in certain instances. So in terms of what Kristine said, that's why that team bonding and that working together as a team is very important. And what we did have in our team is we had different team members that worked with different agencies, and that allowed us to kind of garner information together to really strategize about some of the plans that we had going forward. So I think that team bonding is very, very important.
So we're almost out of time. Miran, you have your hand up. I don't know if you have another question or you just didn't take it down from last time. I just want to acknowledge that.
Oh, no, I just hadn't taken it down from last time.
Okay, great. So we have about 2 minutes left, and I'm going to give our panelists 15 seconds. What would you offer in 15 seconds, advice or thoughts about your experience? Could be 20 seconds.
If you try your hand at negotiations, this is the place to do it.
Okay, thanks, Kristine. Elena, Katrina, Josh, 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
I would say, if you really want to get skills in, de-escalation, then this is a really great way to do that.
Great.
Josh? Yeah, I think that, if anything, if you wanted to gain skills in conflict assessment, or you wanted to really challenge yourself in a way that you didn't before, I think that's really important as far as like having grace or having that humility is very important. So it's a lot of words in 15 seconds.
Great. And Elena.
Yep. So go into this experience with open mind. Try to not to judge yourself and others, and just be ready for surprises.
That's great. Well, thank you all. We are just about at time. So I want to thank Katrina, Kristine, Elena, and Josh, who are my students from the class. and who some of you are still my students, so I'm glad to carve out some time. More importantly, I want to thank everyone else who came today, who was interested in this and is curious about this type of education. Experiential learning is really important. If you are a master's degree student at the Carter School, or you're thinking about coming as a master's or a PhD at Carter School, recognize that having experiences is really very much a way of having the most of learning, right? And really changing yourself in the most significant way. So thank you all, and thank you to Amber, who was our backup. And we will end it there. I know this is being recorded and archived. I don't know how it's being distributed. I'm sure Amber or somebody will let us know about that at a certain point. So have a great day. It's raining where I am. It's pouring in Montgomery County. I don't know where it is where you are. So stay dry.